Good morning, everyone. I'm here this morning with Brother Philip Brown and my brother Devin Moore. I want to share with you a couple of things that I put together to try and encourage you on this Christian race. When I was in college, I had a professor, Professor Turnipseed. He was my business professor, and I majored in business. He taught international markets, and I learned a lot from him. And in fact, he's the reason that I haven't worked for someone since I was 18. I learned a whole lot from him. I eventually started taking his lab and hanging out with him a lot, and I learned a lot from him. I learned that when you work with an employer, your employer usually makes about 8 times what you're worth. I learned a lot of things from him, but one thing he said to me caught my attention. We talked about so many things, so many ranges of things, and we stumbled upon the topic of Christianity one day. And Professor Turnipseed looked me in the face and he said, "You know what, Stone?" He said, "Christianity is for the birds." I said to him, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, I believe it's a made up thing. It's just for the birds. It's not for me." And that stuck with me. I respected that man's opinion a lot, in a lot of ways. In fact, I believe I am where I am today as far as the financial world because of Mr. Turnipseed. But he told me Christianity was for the birds. And I never forgot that. But you know what? As I grew in my Christian faith, I came to find out, and as I learned a little more about birds, I came to find out that Professor Turnipseed might not have been too wrong with that Christianity is for the birds. I learned that birds fly south for the winter, but before they fly south for the winter, they prepare themselves. They all gather, they meet together in one place. They get all of the fellow birds together in one place, and they select a leader. They select a wingman that replaces the leader. If the leader gets tired, they work things out together. If you will, grab for me Acts chapter 2. Start at verse 42, and let's find out if Christianity is really for the birds. Let's look at that. Let's see if we can look at some things that model Christianity after birds. Go ahead, Devin.
Acts chapter 2, begin at verse 42. They joined with the other believers.
Wait a minute. First of all, they join together with the other believers. So when the winter time comes, the birds join together. Christians. This is Acts chapter 2. Let me give you a little bit of background about this. This is after the day of Pentecost. This is when Peter preached the first sermon and the church was started. When the church was started, in other words, when they started on their journey, they joined together. What else, Devin?
With the other believers and devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching.
They prepared themselves by listening to the apostles' teaching. These birds prepared themselves for this trip. They selected leaders, they selected wingmen, they selected people who were going to be in the rear guard. These people equipped themselves with the apostles' teaching. This day, I'm asking you, have you equipped yourself with the apostles' teaching? Have you familiarized yourself with New Testament teaching? What the apostles taught for you to be saved, what they teach for you to continue to be saved, what they teach for you to live a godly life. Have you equipped yourself with the apostles' teaching? Go ahead.
And fellowship.
And they fellowship. They equipped themselves with teaching, and then they got to know each other on a personal level, and they fellowshiped. If you know anything about fellows, you know what a wagon wheel is? A wagon wheel is this big circular thing, and it has sticks in it, and it has a little circle in the middle that keeps the wheel together. The sticks are called fellows. Those things support the wheel, and if a fellow breaks, then the wheel is no longer supported. So these fellows work together to create movement. So fellowship is what they did. What else did they do?
Sharing in the Lord's Supper and in prayer.
They shared in the Lord's Supper and they prayed together. These birds got together before the trip. And they fellowshiped. And they did some training before the trip. Christianity is for the birds. And then after they get everything together and they take flight, There's some things that go on during that flight. They form a V formation, and the logic of them forming this V formation is because they're heading into a wind. They're heading into a wind, so only the front man has to face the full brunt of the wind. One person is suffering for everyone else. He's facing the brunt of the wind, and he's flying. And the people that are behind him, the birds that are behind him, get to fly in his drift. Therefore, it's not as bad for them as it is for him. He puts himself to the front. Our elders in the church put themselves to the front for us. They deal with the problems for us. They teach. They're out there in front. They deal with the persecution for us. Christ was their front man. He dealt with the persecution for them. And he faced it for us so that we don't have to have it as rough. The elders teach us their experiences. They deal with the front winds for us. They went out there and they experienced and walked this Christian life and followed Christ through persecution so that we don't have to have it as bad. Christianity is for the birds. It's for the birds. And they get in this V formation and they fly. And a beautiful thing about when they fly, they're on this journey. It's usually a few hundred miles. I mean, you go down to Florida, where we're from. I'm from Miami. You go down to Florida and you see hundreds and hundreds and thousands of birds, and all the trees and all of the electrical wires. You see them there. And most of these birds have come down from far places like Canada and New York and New Jersey. They have made this long journey together. Well, there's some things that take place that happen on a journey like this. And I want to show you some things about these birds. Let me tell you what they do. If one of them gets injured on the trip, you know, 2 birds go and stay with that bird until it either dies or gets better. Grab Luke chapter 15 for me. I want you to start at verse 1. They stay with that bird. 2 birds go stay with that one who's injured until it dies or it gets better, and then they go on with their trip. Read that for me, Brother Dan.
Luke chapter 15, begin at verse 1. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach.
Okay.
This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such despicable people, even eating with them.
Oh, wow. Keep going for me, Dan.
So Jesus used this illustration. If you had 100 sheep, and one of them strayed away and was lost in the wilderness, wouldn't you leave the 99 others to go and search for the lost one until you found it?
This is our leader talking. This is Jesus Christ, our founder, our creator, our sustainer. He said to those wicked Pharisees, he said, if you had a group of 100 sheep and one of them happened to fall and get away, fall astray, wouldn't you leave your 99 to go and help and rescue that one? You know, God created these birds, and Christianity is for the birds. Professor Turnipseed, I look you in your eye today if you can watch this and tell you you are correct. Christianity is for the birds. The birds have created a model that Christ had already set and is there. Christ said that we are to leave the 99 to help the one. If you are a Christian, if your brother falls, if he is discouraged, if he is in dismay, you are to leave and help him. Just like the birds leave the flock and help the other to recover. Christianity is for the birds. And also, while things are going on this trip, I know that leader he has to get tired. He has to get tired, and he has to think, he has to say, this is wearing me thin, to be out in front all the time and to deal with this brunt of this wind. If you read 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 for me, I want to tell you some things that these birds do. The birds that are in the back, they're not just sitting there. The actual last 4 birds on each corner of the V are hunking. They're making noises. And these noises are not in competition, but the hunks are to let the leaders know that we're still here and we support you. They're encouraging the leader. They're letting him know so he doesn't have to look back to check and see if they're there. They are encouraging the leader and letting him know we are still here. Let's keep going. What does Thessalonians say?
1 Thessalonians 5, verse 11 says, so encourage each other.
Encourage.
And build each other up.
And build each other up.
Just as you are already doing.
The church has to encourage one another and build each other up. Just like they were already doing in the first century. This journey as a Christian, if you're a real Christian, you're going to go through things where you need encouragement. The Bible teaches that you are to come out from among them. You are to separate yourself from the world. And when you take a stand for what Christ teaches, you're going to need encouragement because you're going to be ostracized. You're going to be talked about. You're going to be put at a different level. They will treat you bad. Look at our Savior. They beat him. They spat on him. They killed him. They took his clothes. And if they did it to our leader, if we follow his footsteps, they will do it to us. So Thessalonians told us to encourage one another. Those birds in the back, they encourage one another. Christianity is for the birds.